Okay, thank you, Kendra. On behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, thank you for joining us for the CEU webinar, Learning with the Latch Manuals, Strange but True Edition. Today, speaker is Denise Donaldson, owner of Safe Ride News and publisher of the LATCH Manual. I am Anna Red, the GSHA representative of the National Child Passenger Safety Board. We have planned time to answer questions at the end of the presentation, so please answer your questions in the Q&A box. Thank you. As a reminder, attendees are requested to not participate in this webinar if you are operating a motor vehicle. The webinar will be recorded and you can listen to the recording when you safely arrive at your destination. The recording will be posted to the Child Passenger Safety Learning Portal at carseateducation.org within 1 to 2 business days. For the child passenger safety technicians and attendants, the presentation qualifies for 1 CEU Continuing Education Unit, CEU. Attendance at this webinar is required for at least 45 minutes for the CEU credit. Proof of attendance will be emailed 24 hours after the webinar. When entering the CEU into your Safe Kids profile, this is a webinar/teleconference, and all required information will be found on the proof of attendance. Please join me in welcoming Denise.
Hi, and welcome to all of you as well. I am happy to be here today to talk about how to use latch in vehicles with your becoming familiar with the instructions for both the vehicle and the car seats. Of course, we're talking about the latch manual, but the point is that you're going to know how to safely install car seats using tools that you will get from the latch manual. And each time I do a new webinar on the LATCH Manual, a 400-page book, I try to come up with some kind of an angle that makes it a little more engaging. And so this time, as I was reviewing the LATCH Manual for the 2025 edition, I noted a bunch of things that were kind of what I would call oddities. And as I went through, I kind of jotted those down, figuring that that might be a way to punctuate each of the sections that we go through. So we kind of talk about some of the things that you might need a heads up about, but at the same time, of course, using that segue to draw out some of the more common situations so that you're getting information that will really serve you in all of your work. In addition, I want to help us all learn more about the outlook for Latch, things that are coming down the road. And as always, I want you to know about your helpful resources. And of course, our number one helpful resource is always going to be the owner's manual for the car seat in the car. Definitely saying to check those as well as your labels and any kind of online information from the manufacturer, directly from the manufacturer. But also the current latch manual is one of your important resources, because while the manuals are written from the manufacturer, the latch manual Appendix A and Appendix B are contain information that directly comes from the manufacturer. In many cases, it's going to clarify or even update information that might be in those manuals. So it is equally important to make sure you're checking Appendix A and Appendix B for things that might update what you can get in manuals or give you more information. And along those same lines, as I mentioned, I review the entire latch manual every couple of years, but we also ask the manufacturers to review their information every couple of years. So while they are definitely giving us the new cars and new car seat information, they're also reviewing policies and checking out, in some cases, it's clarifications that I've heard from the field, or that Katrina Rose, who works on the vehicle side with me, we figure out some things that maybe need clarification. And so we get that permission from them. So we have them review everything. They send us back their information, and then we might review it and maybe even suggest some changes, but we don't go to press until we've sent it back to them and have gotten complete approval from them that this is an extension or supplement to their manuals that they are approving for the use of child passenger safety technicians. So if your kit looks like this one, you don't want to be using old manuals. Those, yes, they definitely contain information on old vehicles, but the new one, which is currently the Blue 2025 edition, is the one that's going to have information that you need today, because it has the most current updated information, even on older cars. Also, it has the correct information for car seats. So I have all the older cars because those cars never expire, but car seats do. And so not only do we keep all the older cars, I have to really be careful when we're doing Appendix A to make sure we've carefully removed any car seats that have been discontinued and then have been in use for as long as any model might be expired, so that we're not continuing to describe how to use those. So that's another reason you want to only use the current version. And if you're new to the Latch Manual, it is updated every 2 years, and we change the cover color each time just to make it apparent when a new one has come out and that you're grabbing the correct version. So this current manual is going to be in effect until the beginning of 2027. Another resource that I want to make sure I tell you about is the Latch Gallery, which has been around a long time, but people may not be aware of it. You can find it at saferidenews.com under the Latch tab, and it is a free resource. It is noted in the notes section of the Latch Manual's Appendix B for any car that has an entry in the Latch Gallery, but you don't have to have a Latch Manual to even use it. It is going to have a gallery of tether anchors and lower anchors. And this kind of goes along. If you click on those, you can see the little thumbnails for each one and how you could scroll down and find a car you might be working in. It goes along with our theme of weird but strange but true, because these are going to be the kind of things that, I try really hard to write it out in technician speak and as clear as possible in the Latch Manual, but we don't have space for a lot of different pictures or images from owner's manuals and clarification images. So this is where the Latch Gallery allows us to expand further on things. And so it can be helpful for those strange situations. Now, if you see a strange situation in the field, I hope you will find a Latch Gallery entry that will help you. And oh, that makes it so much clearer. But if you go there and you're disappointed and don't find something that you thought should be there, well, take pictures of that situation and write it out for us in our Latch Gallery image submission form. And we would be happy to pull that together into an entry. And we'd even ask you if it's okay to give you credit for that in the Latch Gallery, because that way we can constantly build and help each other when we see these strange things in the field. As I mentioned, I wanted to also give you some heads up on things that are becoming along about Latch. And most importantly, we have some recent federal activity to improve Latch usability. So way back in 2015, there was a notice of proposed rulemaking from NHTSA, and they had, at that point, 15 years into having Latch roughly, they had noted that there were several aspects of Latch that could be improved upon to make it fulfill its full potential to be the easy way to install. And so it was there were several proposals made that could improve Latch. And at that time, this image was put into many of my presentations to kind of a goofy way, but to suggest to people in my presentations that yes, we have some improvements to Latch coming along. But that was back in 2015. And for several years, I had it in the presentations. And then I kind of started to seem like maybe we would never get a final rule. But suddenly in January of this year, there was a final rule on those topics that will bring about future Latch ease of use requirements. So if you're interested in reading the whole really long document, you can go search at regulations.gov by this docket information. But I will in this presentation describe some of the high points of these requirements that will, I think, really make things easier on us going forward. In terms of when that's going to happen, the compliance deadline for vehicles, which is most of this is about upgrading vehicles, isn't until model year 2029, and then allows a 3-year phase-in period. So only a portion at first till 100% 3 years later. So down the road a bit. There are a couple of aspects that affect car seats. So that'll affect 213 and our future 213B, which I will talk about in a moment. Those will go into effect on January 7th of 2028. And while the regulatory freeze that came into effect in late January did temporarily stop the effective date for this particular final rule, I'm happy to say that the government has already said that it has gone into effect and it's in the Federal Register now. And the review process did not affect our compliance deadlines. So those compliance deadlines that are listed there are due to go into effect. So I mentioned that there were a couple of things that affect the car seat side of things, and these affect both the car seats and the cars. And so one of them is that we're going to have uniformity and consistency in the markings of our lower anchors and our tether anchors, as well as the parts on the car seats. So I put wow, because this is kind of exciting. Now, these images aren't new to you. These are already things we see, but they aren't consistent. So on the left-hand side, you have the lower anchor image. That's the marking that is there, but you don't have to put markings on currently unless you can't see the anchor. That's going to change. They're going to be required to have this marking on every seating position with lower anchors. And then the tether anchor side, many people would be surprised to know that there are no requirements for a tether anchor marking. And so we do have voluntary standards in the industry for that, but it hasn't been 100% uniform. And so we're going to have these consistent markings and uniformly in all tether anchors going forward. So that's great on the vehicle side, but new to the car seat side is that these same images are going to be put onto the parts. So probably like most likely a stamp on the metal for the hooks or the connectors, or possibly on a tag nearby. So that's amazing, right? Because while the average caregiver may not see a tiny little stamp on the hooks, we as CPSTs will be able to say, look, see, there's a stamp, put it to the part in the car, and it's just so much more direct. In the same kind of idea, they're also going to have required latch terminology on both the car seat and the car side of things. So this is exciting as well. And it's just these 5 terms. It doesn't, go down into the weeds on the terminology, but really just making sure these 5 terms are matching up to each other and consistent in both the car seat manual and the car manual, I think is going to help a lot. So we're going to have lower anchors and tether anchors are our vehicle parts, and lower anchor attachments are on the car seats. If it's rigid, it's a rigid lower anchor attachment and a tether. So these, I hope, are terms that are fairly familiar to you. I've been using these in the LATCH manual for many years, because I aligned it with NHTSA way back when they put this into the notice of proposed rulemaking. And so it aligns there. And even the CPST curriculum now has pretty close to this. These are the terms pretty close. So the main thing is that even the car seat manufacturers will have to do a little bit of changing, but the vehicle manufacturers are going to have to use this consistent lower anchor and tether anchor term, which seems a little bit like, well, what's the big deal? Well, if you read carefully in your manuals, you'll see several different terminologies used for these parts. So the one that springs to my mind is there's some European manuals that would call a tether anchor an eyelet or a strap bracket. And when that's lining up with the parts between the two manuals, it's confusing, right? So that's really, I think, going to help caregivers down the road when these go into effect. Of course, they're not in effect right now, but even those compliance deadlines are, you can have early compliance. And as cars are updated, hopefully they will do early compliance. So this is a wow to me as well. One other thing I'll just note, as among the many updates in the latch usability final rule, is that they had proposed these tools to actually test lower anchors to ensure that they have ease of attachment. And so they did accept lower anchor depth minimum within the bite, or maximum, within the bite, and that there be a clearance angle. So things not interfering, like a seatbelt right over your anchor, is not going to be allowed. They also suggested a force limit, but they had problems with consistency in that tool. So they didn't add the force limit requirement that they had proposed. But, and I agree with this, NHTSA felt that if they did these first 2 things, they were going to get pretty far toward making latch much easier to attach. And now, if you've been only looking at new cars or cars since 2015, you may feel like, well, all of these things are fairly clear. And I have to give a shout out here to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's latch usability ratings, because the NPRM, NHTSA's proposals, certainly gave manufacturers an idea of where NHTSA was going. So they had kind of a roadmap. But also at the same time that NPRM came out, IHS implemented some ratings for vehicle latch. And so if you've not looked at those, they're at ihs.org. You just look under their ratings for vehicles, like crash ratings. But if you scroll all the way down, if they've rated the vehicle, they would show latch usability underneath all those crash ratings. And because those rating criteria were similar to what NHTSA had proposed, we are already seeing manufacturers responding to wanting to get higher ratings so that they, on that rating scale, so they have done a lot of the updates already. So the final rule is great, but fortunately it gave a roadmap as well as these ratings for manufacturers to respond ahead of time, and having the final rule in place will just kind of complete that so that we don't see as many problems in the future. And I'm going to point out a few other changes as we go through this presentation, but that's kind of your baseline. Okay, so next I'm going to go into some of these strange but true scenarios, but I first want to just quickly point out, and if you've seen me present before, you've probably seen this, but I want to make sure people realize that my 400-page book, you got to be able to flip to the pages fairly quickly. So I want you to understand there's a glossary at the beginning. So again, if you're confused about terminology, go to the glossary. Then there are 8 chapters that are noted here with these little tabs. And then there are the appendices A, B, and C. And so the chapters are listed here. I'm not going to talk about those very much today, a little bit, not much. But the main thing to note is that these are really a very good way to get your grounding with Latch, kind of like a little textbook. Not that that sounds very exciting, but please also understand that Chapter 6 does have vehicle manufacturer information. So, and a lot of it you wouldn't find in a manual, so you would want to go there for retrofitting tether anchors. And then Chapter 7 has additional information on rear-facing tethering from both the car seat and a little bit from the vehicle manufacturers that you're not probably going to find in manuals. So those would be good places to look if you're finding yourself in the situation with either of those scenarios. You know, rear-facing tethering is something that we don't learn in our certification class to a great extent. So this kind of tidy little chapter is a good way to get a grounding on that, or to teach a new tech about that, or be reminded. And there's even a table in that chapter that tells you which car seats do allow rear tethering. So I do encourage you to go check out all the chapters and those in particular. But today we're going to talk more about Appendix A, B, and I'll start talking more about C, which is about C for center, latch in center positions. So here's our first strange but true scenario. Does any vehicle have a position that allows installation using lower anchors that does not also have a seatbelt? So we have a lot of scenarios where we have a seatbelt in a seating position, but no lower anchors, of course. But what about the opposite? That seems really strange, but it is true, of course. So here we have it in the 2004-2007 Ford Freestar and Mercury Monterey. So 2 vehicles have this. When you have the bench seat installation option configuration, you have 2 different installation options for car seats. In that second row, you can either have 2 for the 2 latch positions, or you can use the inner bar of the outboard positions to have installation in the center. And I want to be really clear. This sounds like borrowing, right? But it's not. It's actually, they're actually centered up. It looks like this. Those bars are centered up so that they would be an 11 inches apart. So it's a standard situation in the center. The other thing I want to be really clear about is when you do this, it needs to be very approved in the manual. Just, you can't eyeball this situation. It has to be approved in the manual. But this is what the seating situation looks like. We only have the 2 seat belts. You can see the buckles right there kind of in the center. And there's no seat belt for that center position because there's not really a seating position there. But they are saying that you can put the car seat on that center position. I kind of push down those buckles, put the car seat there, and install them using those 2 inner bars. And that would be standard. So unlike a borrowing situation, you don't need to get approval from the car seat manufacturer, but of course you need approval from the vehicle manufacturer, which in this owner's manual states it pretty clearly right here. It also states some other things which are repeated in the LATCH manual. So if you go to the LATCH manual and you go to Ford and you look under the table that has vehicles with 3 or more rows, so that's stated up here at the top, you go alphabetically to find the Freestar. And then under that, you would have for that center position in the second row, this full description that tells you that you're allowed to do it, which is nice. You know, it's such a strange situation. I'd kind of like to have confirmation, so that's good. And it also notes that while that position doesn't have its own dedicated tether anchor, the manufacturer of the vehicle is allowing you to go down and use either of the outboard. Also, very clearly, if you're using that center position, you can't use either of the outboard positions. This is an opportunity to get center installation, but you wouldn't be able to use the seat belts or latch in the outboard position when it's used. So that's a very strange but true situation. Less rare is this situation in another Ford vehicle that ran from 2001 to 2019, but it's similar because this is another case where you can more clearly see that those latch for the outboard are squeezed to the middle so that the two inner ones are a standard width apart to make a center position. So unlike in the Freestar Monterey, in this Taurus vehicle, it does have a seat belt, so you have a seating position there, but it's the same thing as far as latch is concerned. You would be having standard latch in the center position. But if the latch doesn't work or it doesn't fit well there for whatever reason, the child's too heavy, then you have at least a seatbelt installation option in this vehicle. So I thought I'd draw your attention to a table that I think few people actually realize is there. It's at the very back of the latch manual, table C2. So more often I talk about table C1, which is the borrowing table, but this is a table that is about standard center latch. And so what this table does is it compiles on 2 sheets every vehicle that has the opportunity to do standard center latch in any car. So, what I did is kind of looked at the various configurations that will allow this, and I came up with 5 different scenarios. So the first scenario is this one we see with the Ford vehicles I just showed you, where they've shifted its center. So each are 11 inches apart. You can see it in the image. And then there's even a little footnote about the Monterey and Freestar about this unusual situation where there's not a seatbelt there. And then there's configurations 2 and 3, 2 being our 5th bar method, which is a growing one. That one's there's more and more coming in on that one. And then there's the overlapping method that you can see pictured there, which is kind of a dying method. They haven't had one since 2012 like that. I don't expect to see it coming back anytime soon, because it's very confusing when you have 2 bars that overlap, which ones go together. It's a little bit difficult. So that one has been not as popular. Now, remember, there's a second page for this because, of course, there's many other ways you can have latch in the center. And configuration 4 is in any vehicle where you just have one latch position in a row, or you have a center position next to just an outboard. So you don't have 3 across, but just one in the center adjacent to one other or by itself. So an example of that would be back to that Ford Freestar, because you saw in the 3rd row, there's just one center position, and we have other minivans like that we use, and obviously several other vehicles. And there's only a few of those in current models, but we've had many over the years. And of course, configuration 5 would be that ideal, I guess you'd say, where you have a latch set dedicated for each position. So there's enough width so they don't have to overlap. And you can see the picture below where you have 1, 2, and 3 all together in the same row, and they're clearly marked in this case. But even when you have that situation where you have 6 bars, so you have 1 for each, always check for restrictions, which will be listed in the latch manual as well as the owner's manual, when using multiple latch positions at the same time. Because even when it looks clear that you could do that, there are often restrictions for where other people can sit, even other adults can sit, on whether 3 can be installed using the lower anchor bars at the same time. Certain ones can be used together, and while not another. So there's a variety of limitations. And so always be sure to check on those. And then last, I'll just complete talking about this Appendix C by noting that there is a nice little first page that talks about the safety benefits and describes the difference between standard and borrowing. So if you're teaching someone the basics of center latch, this is a nice little 1-pager on that. And as I mentioned, table C1 is that cross-reference borrowing, because that's a situation where if you're borrowing, it means it's wider than 11 inches, and you would have to get permission from both the car seat and the car manufacturer. And then lastly, I'll just note that the new NHTSA rules aren't going to affect center latch. And I mention that because NHTSA had proposed, should we say that they have to provide for center latch? And they ultimately said they're not going to require that. However, I'll also note that the IHS in their rating system came up with an idea to give a kind of an A+, or that's not actually how their rating goes, but they get an extra bonus point that sets them above others if they do provide for some sort of center latch. So I mentioned that configuration 2 is growing, and also the borrowing table has grown to 2 pages. So that's been an encouragement, I'm sure, for more car manufacturers to provide that center latch situation, because so many parents, caregivers do want to be able to install with latch, and they do want to install in the center. So it's nice when those two things come together. Okay, moving on to another strange but true situation. Is there a vehicle that allows an accessory to be attached to a tether anchor at the same time as the car seat's tether? So typically we would say don't put two things on the same bar at the same time, certainly not while it's being used as a tether anchor. So why wouldn't we would want an accessory on that? Well, it's strange but true. There is at least one that we found, and that is the 2008 to 2019 Smart 42. So I see this vehicle around all the time. It was discontinued a few years ago. It is only a 2-seater. There's no back seats. So you might wonder, well, what does that matter for families? If there's a car out there and people have it, somebody's going to want, or many somebodies are going to want to put children in it. So it's good that the manual describes and is required to have a tether anchor in the vehicle. And this is a page on the left from how to tether in that vehicle. The indicators on the image, number 2 is just saying that's the back of the seat. Number 3 is where the tether anchor itself is. And number 1 is a little, kind of looks like a little mustache or bow tie thing, which is kind of elastic. And if you're tethering a car seat in the front seat, or if you have a forward facing car seat in the front seat, you should tether it, and you should put the tether strap through. It's kind of an elastic thing. You pull it outward, drop the tether strap through, and then go down to hook to the number 3 tether anchor, which is great that it has that kind of guide, because with that angled, that narrow top of the seat and the angle to the tether anchor, it's a good thing to be able to stabilize that in the center where it needs to be. So as I mentioned about that accessory, of course, if someone has, even if they have a tiny car, they're going to want to carry gear in the car. And so they have this protective divider plus that has a mesh screen, as well as some ability to store your luggage there. And the description of how to install it includes attaching it to the lower, or to the tether anchor that's on the floor. And so this is actually on the right here from the manual. It says if you're using divider plus, the hooks of the top tether and the divider plus are attached to the same anchorage. So it helpfully does tell us that they're both attached at the same time. Well, does it say at the same time? If I were out in the field and I read that, I would be most of the way there, but not entirely convinced, because it is so important to be sure it's okay if you're going to put the force of your tether onto something, that you would have another thing on there too. That would make me very uncomfortable. So we would, of course, then for the latch manual, get further clarity. So here it says in the notes for this 4.2 that they may hook to the tether anchor at the same time. So it's giving you that additional, okay, we're good. It's okay to do that. The other thing I thought I'd point out here is, of course, the center position borrowing, which is always in the first part. We call that the bullet section of each entry for vehicle manuals. For the Smart, it says it's not applicable because they clearly don't have a center position. But the other thing that's noted here is there are no lower anchors in any of the vehicles that Smart made. And the reason for that is because of exemptions from FMVSS 225 for some of those 2-row vehicles. Also, you probably are aware, exemptions are given for convertibles not to have a tether anchor in those vehicles, even though many do. And the reason I bring this point up is because in the new latch usability final rule, many of those exemptions are going to go away. So if this vehicle were to come back, and many of the convertibles and 2-row vehicles on the road right now, they're going to have more of those parts, not less, going forward, because they're taking away some of those exemptions. So we can start to see more of what we're used to regarding latch in vehicles. Now, when I first put out this strange but true, you might have thought of this scenario because I was talking about two things attached to one anchor at the same time. In this case, though, in this pickup truck situation with the router system where you take the tether through the router and then you hook to another router looking thing, which is also your tether anchor. If you have two car seats in the outboard positions, like what's shown in the image on the bottom, looking through the back window, those are two tether straps going through the router, and then they both, we both want to attach that same center loop. Is that okay? And in this case, in these cases, it is okay. And often the owner's manual doesn't say that clearly, because typically owner's manuals talk about installing one car seat at a time. So we always make sure in the latch manual that we mention specifically and clearly that yes, you can attach both of these at the same time. This isn't the answer to the strange but true because it's not an accessory, but I thought I'd call this one out. And I also wanted to call it out because it relates to our NHTSA final rule. So we have this way to install in pickup trucks, and then if we don't use that, most of the pickup manufacturers use this other method where you have to fold the seat forward and attach to a tether anchor that's either on the back wall or occasionally, like some of the newer Toyotas, on the back of the vehicle seat itself. And the interesting thing that I wanted to share with you is that NHTSA's new rule is no longer going to allow tether anchors to be only accessible if you fold the seat back forward. So all of these that we've seen where we have to move the seat forward are going to have to be redesigned. And many of them will probably redesign to the routing system. Very likely we'll see some more of those. Even though those aren't particularly easy to use either, we will probably see some more of those. And the reason, besides, they don't want to allow tether anchors to be obstructed, which makes sense. If you can't see the tether anchor, you're less likely to use it. But the other concern here with these pickups is when you have to unlock the seat back and fold it forward, it is possible to put the seat back up, even push it up pretty hard, and install the car seat very tightly and tether it tightly, yet the seat back not be locked in place. And so in the latch manual, anytime we unlock a seat back, we make it very clear in the notes, ensure that the seat back is relocked, because that's really dangerous to have an unlocked seat back behind a car seat. But in this case, that was a secondary reason for preferring the routing system, even though, like I said, we know that that's not a particularly easy one. This one will no longer be allowed. And just to kind of talk more about what things are going to change with our lower anchors, NHTSA had proposed making it be required that every tether anchor be a metal crossbar, which is what we see mostly, right? And they did go with that, only they made exceptions for pickup trucks, convertibles, and small buses, which I would call full-size vans, like the express vans, that kind of thing. Well, that's where we see at this point, most have transitioned to being the metal crossbar. And so the exceptions are pretty much where we do see flexible kinds of materials for our anchors today, but that's okay. It makes it so that we're going to know what to expect going forward. Also, while on the floor is okay, so that Smart for Two would still be okay, being deep under the seat, like in some older captain's chairs in Honda Odysseys, that would no longer be allowed. So Honda has transitioned out of that. I don't know of any current model that has it, but it's going to be specified that that's no longer allowed to have to dig way under the seat to find a tether anchor. And then lastly, I just want to note that there are other kinds of obscuring tether anchors that are called out in NHTSA's final rule preamble, so that we can understand that we won't have these going forward. So two examples, both from the Toyota Prius V, and these are images from the Latch Gallery. One is that when the vehicle seat itself is rolled all the way back, so you have ample room for the person in that seating position or the car seat. If when you move it all the way back, it abuts the cargo floor and the cargo floor obscures your vision of the anchor, that's not going to be allowed. So, and then that same vehicle has an example of when you do roll it forward and you can see it there, it is covered by vehicle fabric from the factory, and then the owner or CPST would punch through that fabric frequently. It's well, typically it would be scored there, and then we'd punch through to find it. And you'd have somewhere nearby usually a label to show you where, but not always, as we know. Anyway, any of those cases where the vehicle fabric is covering it up will no longer be allowed. Even if it's, we are able to punch through, we shouldn't have to do that. That's done at the factory so that it's clear where it is. So to the Toyota Prius and Toyota's credit, they've redesigned this model since this point. So these problems no longer exist in current ones, but there are other vehicles that have both of these types of issues. And so when those exist, those are going to be redesigned in the future to no longer allow these obscuring situations. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about load legs. So here is an interesting one. Is there a car seat with a removable load leg? And that is sounds a little bit strange, but true. I mean, typically what we see are the load legs that swing out from under, and if you're not going to use them, they swing back. But there is now a car seat, the Junie by Romer, which is a new brand on our market, which is what makes it a little bit strange because maybe you haven't seen this one yet, but it's out there. And you can see it's a really pretty little car seat, and it's showing it here in the image. It has the anti-rebound bar, and you're looking at it, the part that would be up against the seat edge. But you can kind of see that there's this metal piece that comes around the back. And so if we look in the instructions, that's this part here that goes to a hub. And at the hub, it would have the load leg. But as you can see on the right, instructions are showing you how to click that on or click it off. So there's no swinging involved with this one, which is nice. You know exactly where it goes. But you can, if you want to use it, you put it on, and if you don't, you take it off. Instructions include some warnings, some important warnings, including that they want you to remove the floor mat. They don't want you to have that raise the car seat up to make it recline more. And also they would not want you to keep that leg, like say you have to take it off and not use it. You know, where would we know you would not want it to be a projectile. You don't want it to be just laying there. You would want to have it stowed where it's going to not be a projectile. But the top important point is what I mostly wanted to talk about. It says, do not use the load leg if the vehicle manufacturer does not expressly allow it. Refer to the vehicle owner's manual to help determine if the load leg can be used with the vehicle. So far, I have not been able to find any owner's manuals for vehicles that expressly allow the use of load legs. So they may not expressly say you can't use them, but they don't go there to say you may. So that's of concern to me. It says to refer to the owner's manual to help. Hopefully they would also allow you to refer to the latch manual. There is some help in the latch manual, although it isn't as broad as you could, would need to in all vehicles. And of course, latch leg, load leg or support leg or stability leg aren't actually specifically latch related, but we do include them in the latch manual because some of the manufacturers have asked us to report on this. And, when it's something that's come along new that does affect installation, though we do try to keep it to latch, so the book doesn't turn into 800 pages, we add as much of those details that people need as possible. So I just kind of wanted to bring your attention to it. So one example is in the Dodge and also in Chrysler minivans that have the stow and go seating, where there's a seat would be up, the car seat might be on it, but if no one was using that seat, you're able to flip that down and put it under the floor under a lid. So when the seat is up, there's a lid for the floor, but there's a void space underneath. And so Fiat Chrysler Automobiles that owns Dodge and Ram and Chrysler and Jeep has told us for certain vehicles like this one to say, when there's a sport leg, keep it stowed, don't use it. So that's advice in certain manuals. Now, we got that advice some years back, and subsequently people in the field, it's great to know why they said that, but they tried to apply that to other cars, and that's where we make a mistake. So in the Honda Odyssey, in many model years, there's a spare tire in the space between the second and first rows, and that would mean there's another lid, right, situation. So there was a rumor, I guess you'd call it, that you couldn't use it there either. But that wasn't substantiated from the manufacturer, was it? And so fortunately for us, Honda went ahead and did some testing. And despite being under the underfloor spare tire storage, they were able to test and tell us it's okay to state that it's okay to use the leg in those situations. So that's a case where it is expressly allowed. And the other place you'd want to make sure you check, though, is like I mentioned in that bullet section. So I've highlighted at the top, this is what we mean by bullet section. It's those grayed out, the space with the gray behind it at the beginning of each vehicle manufacturer section that has the brand wide information that kind of adds to everything you'd read about in your notes section. So in this case, there is a bullet for Rivian, which we just got in the Latch Manual for this time. That's a new one for 2025. And Rivian is saying, if you have a support leg in any of our vehicles, which currently is a truck and a SUV, don't use the car seat support leg, keep it stowed. So that's in any position. So that's a brand wide point, and you'd find it there rather than in the notes section. But again, you don't want to take just because one company says something and apply it across the board. You want to make sure you follow the instructions for the particular vehicle brand. And in this case, Tesla asked us to let people know in positions where the car seat can be properly installed, you may use the tether, that you may use the load leg in those vehicles. So definitely you want to check both in the bullet section for information on any car seat check you're doing, as well as in the notes. And then lastly, I just want to highlight, because it could be easy to just look right over this, but for every single car seat or car brand, we start with information on how to contact them, phone call or online. And if you do see something it's not clear or you're concerned about it, definitely call the national number for customer service, which is noted here. Even if they can't help you, I got to be honest, a lot of times I call them, with some of the details we get into, they aren't sure what we're talking about, but it definitely helps them to hear the kinds of things that we're seeing in the field, so that the more they hear about it, the more they understand that we need more guidance on some of these topics. And then lastly, I just want to make sure I focus back onto the car seat side of it, of course, because we also include details in some detail in Appendix A. So if you're not familiar yet with using load legs, foot prop, support leg, stability leg, they're all the same thing, all those terminologies, and it isn't consistent in the various manuals, but you will find them on car seats made by all of these different brands. And by now, most of these brands have multiple car seats with a load leg or whatever you want to call it. So in Appendix A, I like to mention which brands have a leg. And if I'm talking about a specific rear facing seat or forward facing seat for that matter, I like to note it. One thing that is new and came out after the Latch Manual is that Evenflo has come up with a new version of LightMax. They still have the old LightMax, and now we have LightMax Next. If you have not checked that out, definitely do so. It's got a lot of new and interesting features. And one of them is that you can actually buy an accessory load leg. So this one's technically, it doesn't come in the box, so it's not technically removable from the car seat, but you can actually get it as an accessory for an extra $60. And if you want to use it, you can put it in the ports at the front of that LightMax Next. And if you don't want it, it is removable and you can take it off and stow it so it can't become a projectile. So so that is kind of an interesting new accessory, and I think another first for the industry. But I'll just conclude by pointing out that, like I said, I do mention that it has a load leg. You can see up here under the Ling and Lingo, I note that the Ling has a load leg. And in this case, and this isn't as common, but in this case, under design and use, which always please check this out, design and use, in this case, there are differences in how they want you to install based on whether the leg is used or not. So these are going to be things that are in their manual as well, but this gives you that additional place to clarify and back that up. Okay, so the last section I want to go through is this last strange but true. Is there a convertible car seat with a removable upper seat back? That's not typical. It's strange, but it is true. And that's that Baby Trend ProTech model. If you remember when we had Tomy before, we had a model or a series of models like this as well, where you could actually remove this top part. And you can see in the owner's manual, it's kind of like taking off a head restraint for infants up to 22 pounds. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a novelty. They don't make this seat anymore, but there's still models on the market that are not expired. And I, I mainly bring this as a segue to talk a little bit about why you would even want something where the top comes off. And that has to do with fitting a rear facing seat between rows, right? Because we frequently have trouble because of how tight the fit is. And so we want to make sure that we have enough space, and sometimes taking off this top part, at least until the child's 22 pounds, it gives you that additional space. So the thing is, a lot of times we are having trouble fitting between the two, but and other times we really are concerned about the touching. And I've heard technicians talk about, well, you can't let the car seat touch the seat ahead. You can't allow it to touch. And so I wanted to just end by exploring that a little bit. One of the reasons we maybe say that is because for many, many years, Even Flow, and still today, says for their rear facing only car seats, they must not touch. In fact, you have to leave 1.5 inches of space at the top. So this is where it says it in the manual, and this is from their current Light Max, Safe Max, and be any of their rear facing only seats need to have 1.5 inches from the top. And so in recent years, we've been learning more about why that is. And so from an Even Flow blog post, Sarah has described it, that their reason for that is for those rear facing only seats. The concern is that in a rear impact, if the front seat occupant is putting pressure, everybody moves toward the point of impact, right? And if we have a severe rear impact crash and our back seat deforms because of the weight of the front seat passenger, they don't want it to go down over the top of the car seat. They want it, if you leave 1.5 inches, they found, as this seat is moving toward the point of impact, this one also moves and it can clear. So the car seat can clear as the seat would deform. And so that's their rationale for wanting 1.5 inches of space between the infant car seat and the front vehicle seat. So remember that this applies to rear facing only models, those ones that are lower down. It only applies in the outboard positions, so where you're directly behind a front seat. And it only applies in the second row because they're really only concerned with those front seats that really may deform. So it doesn't apply to convertibles and all-in-ones. And you can even see on the Even Flow FAQ that I have here on the Even Flow page, it says they permit contact as long as it's a convertible or all-in-one. Also, if it's in a center position, you might even touch on the edges, but that's okay. That's not a problem. And then if you're in a third row, then they're not concerned with how those second row seats are going to, that they're going to deform. The reason this has become a bigger issue lately is because we're getting the opposite advice from Dorel now. Starting in 2023, Dorel did some testing and they've decided that they want their seats to touch the seat ahead. And they have a different reason. So their reason has to do with impacts to the front of the vehicle and finding that they can lower their head injury criteria, meaning their Hicks scores can go down if they start with touching the seat back. So they found that when there's a gap and everything moves toward the point of impact, there might be a point where the car seat actually strikes the front seat. Whereas if it starts together, they can all move together in tandem and there's not that jarring moment where the car seat would touch the front seat. I want to make it clear, the testing that they did found that even when it's touching or not, they do pass all the NHTSA requirements to be passing 213. However, they do get substantially better scores, better enough that they wanted to change their instructions. So in manuals starting in 2023, it's advising, like it shows in these pictures, that you would have for both rear facing only and for convertibles and all-in-ones rear facing, they want you to start out touching without a gap. And even if it's not in the owner's manual, this is going to be retroactive to all the car seats in use. So that's a job for us as CPSTs, right? How would a caregiver know this? They might find it online, but when we're helping the public, and that we do help the public with these a lot, right? These are a lot of times our program seats, Costco, Safety First, any of their rear facing, as well as their Maxi Cozy. Anytime it's rear facing, they want it to touch. And even if it doesn't state that in the manual wouldn't state you can't. This is just giving you additional advice. So it's retroactive to all. And to make it clear, they do only say outboard position. So their instructions are clear about that. In the center position, this isn't a concern. They also say that it's any seat in front. So this would apply in a third row as well if you happen to have a rear facer in a third row, which isn't super common, but you'd also want to start by touching the second row seat. And it must not lift the car seat off the seat. So what they don't want to have happen is, oh, sure, yeah, it's touching up here, but it can't make it so that it's not touching down here. And that, that's a situation where it's a tight squeeze, which is more commonly what we see. But when you have a lot of space, then that's also suggesting to get the parts together somehow or be as close as possible. So it also says, or be as close as possible. So if you can't quite get touching, like even this image here, doesn't look like they're quite touching, but it's as close as possible, right? So what does must be touching mean though? They didn't give an adjective to say what that means. So it means gentle or light contact always. So this has been clearly confirmed with the manufacturer. Gentle touching. It doesn't push hard. It doesn't change the child angle, and it doesn't hold the car seat off the cushion. It is not supposed to be part of what makes it tight in the install. It's really just that it's a starting position, pre-crash positioning. So we don't want to be saying words like wedging, bracing, or pressing. These are not describing how we're doing it. We're just getting it a little bit close so that it's right there and moves in tandem together. So we have this situation now where we have Durrell that says they must touch. Even Flow, if it's a rear facing, only says they must not touch. But what about all the other companies we work with? Basically, all the others say they may touch gently, lightly, only if necessary. They'd really rather they not, but they may touch if necessary. So that's kind of our current situation. There are some manuals that would suggest that it may not contact, or there needs to be some space, but I will tell you that if you talk to customer service or you check their online FAQs, they are pretty much all agreeing that it may touch if necessary, but only light and gentle touching. Always, if you're in doubt, check the website, call the company representative. On the Safe Ride News website, we have under resources and tools for technicians, we have a listing of the manufacturers representatives that we as CPSTs should reach out to ask these sorts of really technical questions. Because there are other manufacturers we have to ask, right? There's the vehicle manufacturers. What about the vehicle instructions? So just one example from the 2022 Toyota Tacoma, it says vehicles with rear seats, they shouldn't contact the front seat backs. So what do we do when the car seat says they need to touch and the vehicle manual says don't touch, which is probably why most of us think, oh, make sure it doesn't touch, make sure it doesn't touch. But because we get that instruction from the vehicle side of things. So this is not in our curriculum, at least not as of yet, but talking to engineers from both the car seat and car companies, this is the best guidance for how to decide where to find the happy medium is to use the paper test. So the question you'd ask yourself is, could a real paper between, or maybe imagined paper between the car seat and the seat back, could I pull that out without using a lot of force or damaging the piece of paper? If I could do that and it's okay, then I'm in that just liminal space between it's sort of touching but sort of not, and you're not violating what's in any owner's manual for the car, and you're not violating what's in the car seat manual unless it's an even flow rear facing only seat where you need to leave 1.5 inches. Okay. So I'm just going to conclude talking a little more about some of the things in the bullets, because one of the questions is, why do vehicle instructions limit that contact? Because you saw in the Toyota manual says don't do it. Well, why? There are a variety of reasons. One might be one of the ones in some higher end vehicles have some high end head restraint systems, and pressure can affect how those head restraint systems work. So that's for rear impacts. But more commonly, it has to do with their airbag suppression system. So we have been asking for many years, and it's always, there's a bullet for pretty much every manufacturer that has an airbag suppression system, how that system functions, because it's a performance standard that they have to have. It has to turn off if the occupant is small enough, that airbag in the front, but or adjust how it goes off. But they didn't say how they have to design that system. And so while we know that many of them are designed using a weight-based system that could be affected by pressure on the seat, that's not always the case. There are other kind of systems that detect static electricity in the body, that it's not a problem if you press on the back seat. That would be stated here in this bullet. And also please note, we ask the manufacturers to say whether it affects both the passenger and the driver or just one or the other. And if it affects pushing on the seat back like a car seat might do, or if it also affects under the seat, like if we put medical equipment under there or someone's feet, and it's not always true that it's both, and it could be one or the other. So here with Honda, you can see it's only on the passenger side. That might be a consideration for us on where we would put a car seat. And it's saying it could be affected by pressure or force on the back or the underside of the front seat. Whereas in this Tesla, it is also saying it's only on the passenger side, but it's only on the underside of the seat. So there's slight differences in these answers, and these are available to you in the bullet section of the Latch Manual. And just as a parting note, I will also point out that we've been trying to ask manufacturers about some of the other technology that they're putting in the vehicles, including easy entry features where the vehicle seat moves to allow the passenger to get in and then moves forward again to put them back into their preset position. That's going to affect how a car seat behind it that's supposed to touch or not touching is going to be installed. So that's something to consider. And so we have them giving you advice on what to do in those cases, as well as we've been asking about seatbelt, rear seatbelt reminders. Starting in model year 2028, the vehicles are going to be required to have certain rear seatbelt reminders. These have early ones, but the ones that are going to be coming into play coming up are going to actually be able to detect even if a child gets unbuckled. And so we're going to need to know, if we're installing with Latch, how to make it so that once we've installed a car seat with Latch, it's not going to falsely detect that someone's not buckled up properly and give a bunch of bells and whistles that are actually a false alarm. So we're gonna be reporting that in Appendix B's notes as well. And then lastly, this whole situation has made me kind of think a little more about when we move a front seat, right? Because a lot of times people think about moving the front seat back to touch that seat that needs to touch from Dorel. First of all, I'd say if you're installing on a center seat, or any seat really, whatever the seat it's on, think about whether that can move forward to do the moving. But if you have to move a vehicle seat back, or say we've moved a seat forward to give us more space for any installation, please remember to recheck the seatbelt fit for that front seat passenger. And I have pictured here a pregnant occupant, because often that's who is riding in one of the front seats. And we want to make sure that we don't move their seat out of position, do a perfect job on the car seat, and then leave them without a seatbelt that's actually contacting their shoulder anymore or properly fitting them. And I like to note this Hudson Center for Prenatal Vehicle Safety, because they have some great resources available to us to help train people on how to use a seatbelt properly while they're pregnant, which is so important, because fetal injury and fatalities is one of the bigger problems, even more so maybe than infant fatalities and car crashes. So thinking about the seatbelt and the safety of that person in the front seat is also important for any of our installations. So I always end on reminding people to check for Latch Manual updates on our website, as well as other support and the Latch Gallery. I do have a CEU quiz for, if you have a Latch Manual, you can go through and take that quiz to get yet another CEU if you pass with a score of 16 or more, and that's all online. And then lastly, thank you so much for joining us today. We developed the Latch Manual based on your feedback and things that we see in the field. So if you can contact us with any questions or concerns, corrections, things you'd like to see, we love to hear from you to learn what you all need in the field, so that we can make this resource better and better for you as it goes along. So Anna, are there any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, thank you, Denise. Yeah, it's time for questions. And if you haven't already done so, if you'll put your questions in the Q&A. There's one question, which I believe she reworded it. It says, guess my related question would be, have we inquired about a requirement for distance from CRS? The tether anchor needs to be ensured the tether strap can be tightened adequately.
So yeah, I think that there's two ways to look at that question: how far away it is or how close it is. And yes, the new final rule took a lot of attention to how close it is because we have the hook itself. We have usually a little bit of webbing, and then we have an adjuster, and you can't make it any shorter than that distance, right? You can tighten it up. It's fully tightened, and it might still be loose if the anchor is too close to the seat back. That might be what they were asking about. That definitely was addressed in the new final rule. The other thing is that you'll probably have noticed we used to have anchors way far away. The final rule did not, it still gives an area that it's allowed. The new rule did not limit how far they can go. And we have had shorter tether straps lately, partially just so that we don't have extra strap webbing that can cause problems in of itself if it doesn't get tidied up like it ought to. But over time, we've had a lot more of our anchors on the seat back itself, especially as the seat backs have been strengthened to allow for a center seat belt and lap shoulder belt. So those far away ones are not as big of a problem anymore.
And this question, sorry, Denise, was based off,
Yeah.
it was a two-parter. So her first part was any update or advisement on the Hyundai regarding the tether anchor in the Santa Cruz truck. They want direct routing directly behind the seat, which is too close to adequately tighten the strap.
Yeah, so that would be that first part I just said. If they made it like that and you can't get it tight, I would report it as a report a problem. If you go to NHTSA.gov, there's a button. I think it's blue. It's at the top right. It says report a problem. And that is a great thing for all technicians to know about anytime you see a problem out in the field. That would, the more times they see an issue, the more likely they will respond to that issue with a follow-up study. Because I'm thinking, I agree, there are a few situations out there where I'm seeing it pretty darn close. I haven't tested out a whole lot of car seats on those, but I'm starting to worry about that problem as well.
And I think the next question is, what does Evenflow say about rear-facing convertibles?
Okay, so the difference, and sorry if I didn't make that clear, you got a rear facing, I hope people can see my hands here, but the rear facing only seat is down low and it needs that space to make the clear. The the convertibles and all-in-ones, the explanation they've given is that they're higher up, so they just don't need that space. So if those touch gently, they're still going to make that clearance. Those bigger seats are just higher up.
I don't see any other questions. I think there's just one more, Kendra, but I believe you're answering that.
Yeah, I'm typing it now.
Okay.
One thing I do a poor job of is saying how you can get a latch manual. And of course you can go to saferidenews.com to order a latch manual, and also check with your local organization to see if they might have latch manuals that they're giving out. So sorry, I didn't go to this slide. Did you want to cover these last things, Anna?
Yes. Before we go, we have a few closing announcements. We hope you're enjoying the NCPSB webinar series. We're having fun delivering them. We hope you'll join us next month for another CEU's webinar, and we hope to see you on Wednesday, May 28th for our second educator forum. Register today at cps.org/webinars or scan the QR code on the screen. The 2026 National Child Passenger Safety Award nominations are open. Please nominate a technician, instructor, or team that inspires you to go above and beyond in your community. Nominations are due August 31st, 2025. Can't get my years confused. You can visit cpsboard.org/awards to nominate someone today. Again, the webinar recording will be posted to carseateducation.org within 1 to 2 days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, the presentation qualifies for 1 CEU. Proof of attendance will be emailed within 24 hours after the webinar. You must enter the webinar information into your profile at safekids.org to receive the CEU for recertification. All the information you need for your profile will be found in the email you received from Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a safe day, and thank you all for all you do to help keep child passengers and their families safe. Kendra, can you please stop the recording?